Well, hello and welcome to the Columbia Chamber's Commerce webinar. This program is being recorded and will be available at the Chamber social media pages and on the Chamber's COVID-19 resource website located at columbiamochamber.com following the event. We have muted everyone's microphone so that our guest speakers can be heard easily by everyone on the call. So if you have any questions at any time during the webinar, just please type that into the meeting chat feature and we'll ask them at the end of, we'll ask them to our speaker at the end if we have time. In today's webinar, we'll be discussing business liability issues due to COVID-19. As businesses begin reopening here locally in Columbia and Boone County, but also across the country, many are concerned about possible repercussions that might occur if a customer or employee contract COVID-19 while at their business. While these businesses are doing their best to assure that they are following the guidelines set by public health officials, it is also important for them to know what steps to follow to protect their organization, their employees, and their customers. So joining us today, we have a very special guest. So joining us on our call today to discuss this issue is Marc Freedman. He is the Vice President of Workplace Policy Division at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Marc is responsible for developing and advocating the Chamber's response to a wide variety of workplace policy matters. These include union organizing and other labor management issues, overtime, minimum wage, and other Fair Labor Standard Act issues, paid leave and FMLA issues, and OSHA and workplace safety issues. So before joining the Chamber in October of 2004, Marc was the regulatory counsel for the Senate Small Business Committee under the chairmanships of Senator Kip Bond from here in Missouri and Olympia Snowe. Prior to joining the Small Business Committee, Marc had several positions with different construction trade associations, including Painting and Decorating Contractors of America, the Associated Builders and Contractors, and the National Association of Home Builders. So with that, we would like to say a big thank you to Marc for taking his time to speak with our business community this morning. And Marc, can you hear us okay? Marc, are you there?
Yes, but you muted me.
Oh, there you are. You're unmuted now. We can hear you just fine. So Marc, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I'm going to turn this over to you.
Very nice. Thank you for the warm introduction. Well, for me, it's good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, I guess, still for you. So this is a very timely discussion. This has become, I think, one of the biggest areas of interest in the big COVID-19 debate that's going on. As I'll get into in a few moments, it's the heart and soul of what the Republicans are trying to push for in the next package of legislation. So Whitney, I guess you're my clicker here, so if you would advance the slides, please. There we go. So this is my own little opening. Yes, stay on that for a moment. Thank you. So whatever else you may hear is still a swamp, but we're working from home. And just let me tell you that the Chamber is putting the work back in working from home. We have been absolutely crazy busy in the last several weeks since we've all had to reorient ourselves. Next slide, please. So this is what we're talking about. The basic outline is, I think it's particularly concerning to small businesses, but really just about any business. And keep in mind here that what the plaintiff's bar is looking for is some type of deep pocket. So, if you're big, you're even more of a target in this kind of situation. As I'll describe more thoroughly, we're really talking about businesses who are doing the right thing and trying to make sure that they don't become unnecessarily targeted by the plaintiff's bar. Can I get the next slide, please? So what we're already seeing is the lawsuit industry, and really that's what it is, kicking into high gear. So there's ads on TV now. I'm sure some of you may have seen them already. The behind-the-scenes industry that produces these lawsuits is going great guns. The people who market the law firms are out there pushing the media buys for the law firms. And I think this last bullet is particularly interesting and important. There's a whole financial mechanism that goes into putting out these lawsuits. And those people are definitely out there pushing their business. And that last item is really what you have to think about. The lawyers bringing these actions are not looking for court wins. I mean, maybe they could get it, but they're really looking for businesses to roll over and settle for cash and write a check with several zeros on it. So that's really what this is all about, much less so than ending up in court. So a little bit about who would be exposed here. I mean, it's no exaggeration to say that all businesses are really vulnerable here. We just listed a few obvious choices, a few obvious possibilities here. But anyone who has customers, anyone who has employees, pretty much that's what you're talking about here. So different types of lawsuits that can come up, things like employees being exposed in the workplace or customers being exposed in the workplace. Did you put out a product that people can blame for having gotten the disease? And of course, in the more technical way, you can get shareholder class actions. I should also note you can get customer and employee class actions out of this as well. The second bullet here is particularly chilling. Just because you may be a charitable organization or a nonprofit organization, you are not immune here. They will come after you in the same way that they can come after for-profit enterprises. So it really is a chilling concept to think that a church who decides to bring back in-person services could end up getting sued because someone claims that they picked up the disease at that kind of a service. It's pretty heartless, but I would not say it's out of the possibility. The last bullet down there, you've got companies that have changed over their whole operations to support the effort. Distilleries and breweries who are making hand sanitizers, manufacturing companies have gone on to produce needed PPE, other types of operations like that, and they are vulnerable here to being sued if somebody thinks that they didn't make their product correctly, or they can find a way to say that they were responsible for somebody getting the disease. It could be the employee side, it could be the customer side, but these type of companies are definitely vulnerable, even if they are truly trying to contribute to the overall effort. Next slide, please. So here I apologize for the text-heavy nature of my slides. I don't have any real sexy graphics here, but this is just a little bit of a taste of what's been going on with the kind of cases that are already emerging. And I should say this came from a chamber blog put out by our litigation center, and this was this week's entry. These are things that they just put out this week. They've been collecting these cases all along, so there's definitely a growing body of litigation out there showing that these cases are happening. I thought that the ones at the top are particularly interesting because they talk about companies where they're actually trying to do the right thing and getting sued by plaintiffs on the other side. So, we're all supposed to be wearing face masks, right? Well, here's people claiming that they can't wear a face mask because they've got respiratory issues and they're being discriminated against. I can hear your jaws dropping out there, by the way. A woman at a grocery store goes to the checkout counter, and the plexiglass divider there to protect the employee falls on her foot, so she claims an injury. This is truly damned if you do and damned if you don't territory. These companies are truly trying to play along, trying to do what everyone's telling them to do, and yet they're still getting sued. In the workplace, we have a variety of situations where they've been sued for different types of violations with different alleged violations, including not providing the right amount of paid FMLA and sick leave, which is now required. The last bullet there, I think, should be no surprise. We're seeing people alleging discrimination because they are characterized as being in a high-risk category where they don't believe that's the case. Age is, of course, one of the situations, one of the criteria that will come into play here. And then, again, this is just a short sample. So what is the U.S. Chamber doing about this? Well, I think we've been very aggressive in getting the message out, and this is really a very simple message. We want to protect the employers who are doing the right thing. They have to be doing the right thing. This is not about protecting bad actor employers who are ignoring this problem. This is about saying if you're doing the right thing, you should not be vulnerable to basic negligence tort suits. Um, so as we talk about it, we want timely, targeted, and temporary protection. And I'll talk more about what that means in a moment. And we're very clear on saying this is not protection for employers who are, exhibiting gross negligence or recklessness or other levels of higher uh, misconduct. So, this has been characterized as trying to protect everyone. It's not that at all. It's protecting the good actors and making sure that they should not be subject to these lawsuits. So, what's in our proposal? Well, the first part of it is, of course, what I just mentioned, the protection from liability. So, we're trying to talk about protecting businesses who are doing the right thing. And as you note in that second bullet, for this protection applied, businesses must have generally following applicable governance standards and guidance. In this case, oftentimes the CDC guidance, but sometimes things like OSHA and EEOC come into play. Again, the third bullet is what I just mentioned, allow liability without limitation in cases where clear and convincing evidence, and that's a particular standard for evidence, shows that business was grossly negligent, intended to inflict harm, or was willful in their misconduct. Those businesses don't deserve protection, and we're not trying to give them any protection. Part of this is about the procedures that plaintiffs would have to use to bring an action. We want to preempt the state law so that we get a federal standard in place. There is a 1-year statute of limitations, so actions have to be brought within a 1-year time of them occurring. We have a time period for this to happen. As I said, it's temporary, timely, temporary, and targeted. This is the temporary part. And we also want to make sure that if you have a case where you have a person from another state and the company in a different state, that you get into federal court and that they don't get to pick the more favorable state jurisdiction. So that's the federal diversity jurisdiction provision down there at the bottom. Next slide, please. This is a very interesting requirement that we're pushing for, and that is to make sure that if you're bringing an action, you really have to demonstrate that you were harmed by this business. So in your pleadings, in the complaint, you'd have to show that, in fact, where else had you been? The plaintiff would have to show where else they have been if they, where they might also have contracted the disease. They also have to show, they would have to show, if we get this in, some type of expert report demonstrating why that business is the only place they could have gotten this disease. So it's a very narrow, specific requirement that says you've got to really demonstrate that this is the business that harmed you. We've done some polling on this. The part of the chamber that's been working on this issue is called the Institute for Legal Reform. They did a very broad, professionally conducted poll, and you'll see the numbers there. They're very striking in terms of how much support this concept of liability protection is getting. And then the interesting point is the last bullet, where it really cuts across all kinds of political divisions. This is not just a Republican issue. Even Democrats and independents see the value of these ideas, and they all understand that if a business is doing the right thing, they really deserve to have some protection here. So that's what's behind our approach. And finally, just a little note on where this is going. So I think if you're following the news at all, you've seen Senator McConnell out there being very firm that in order for the next bill to move, this is what Republicans will be seeking, some type of liability protection. We've been feeding our proposals into the Senate leadership. Senator Cornyn from Texas is the one managing this question. he has our ideas. Our ILR folks have been working with his office. So, they are definitely in the process of developing legislation. I can't tell you where it is in the stage, but I know that there's lots of engagement going on there. And then I think if you follow the news, the House passed a massive monstrosity last week, 1,800 pages. I mean, nothing good comes out of a bill that's 1,800 pages. And it's a lot of money, as I think you've seen. I think it's about $3 trillion. That's their idea of a bill. The Senate isn't anywhere near that structure right now. So we don't see a bill coming together really anytime in the very near future, possibly sometime in June, if they really get serious about this. That's all I have for you right now, and obviously I'm happy to respond to any questions you have and see what I can tell you. Thank you.
Oh, give me 1 second, Mark. Mark, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I'm trying to get my video to work. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Hey, thank you for your time. We do have a couple questions that were given to us on the front end of this, and if we have any that come up in the chat room, we'll
okay.
I do appreciate the U.S. Chamber working on this. This is one that a number of our members have put out there that there's concern as they're starting to open things up, and I know reading and the information the U.S. Chamber puts out on a regular basis has been invaluable on this. So,
hey Mike, let me just note. As I pointed out, these suits are happening now because a lot of businesses have been open throughout. So, retail places like Walmart's and Walgreens, they didn't get a break here, so they're getting sued even as we speak. So it'll ramp up, certainly more opportunities as more businesses come back online, but nobody should be thinking that it isn't happening already.
Yeah, what are some, have y'all, I know y'all put out kind of some of your general reopening guides, one thing that we pushed out was that, but one thing that was in there that we also pushed out I thought was great was the questions to be asking your employees as you're bringing them back into work to help out with that. But what are some other things that people can be doing, businesses can be doing? There's been talk of having employees sign waivers. There's been talk about the antibody testing, and that's still up for whether that's reliable or not reliable, and how that's being done in different areas. Are those some things, some kind of good practices that employers can do to help show that they're putting in that good faith efforts to do the right thing?
Yeah, let me unpack that, because there's several different items in there that are worth commenting on. Let me start with the employee questionnaire issue. There's lots of efforts to ask employees how they're feeling, have they been exposed, all those kind of things. And I think that's valuable, but employers really need to take that with a large grain of salt and understand that's one piece of information, and it should not be considered dispositive of whether an employee could be contagious. So, and without trying to cast aspersions on employees generally, let's just understand that there are employees who will say, I feel great, even if they don't, because they feel the need to come back to work and earn money. You can't blame them for that, but it means that those surveys are not necessarily the most credible every time. Plus, employees, in their own lives can go off and do things that could put them at risk without, them acknowledging it. They can go out to large gatherings, or they could be even in a family setting where they could have gotten exposed without knowing it, and they may feel fine, but they could be asymptomatic, and then the best efforts of the employer can really be undermined. So I would, it's fine to ask those questions. I just want people to sort of accept the reality that that's not dispositive as to whether an employee can be contagious. You mentioned the idea of testing employees, and I think there's a lot of chatter about how employers would be testing employees upon reentry. I look at that question with a lot. I look at that with a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. I hope that the consensus does not become, this is something employers have to take on in terms of cost and liability exposure. I mean, there's lots of things that could happen there where the employer could really be caught out, and particularly in the context of small businesses. Now, we hope that, you know, if these testings get done, they're done through some third-party operation that you work with, or that, you know, the state puts in place to take care of these things. But I think a lot of those questions haven't been answered and haven't been worked out, and everybody's just talking about, oh, we're going to test, we're going to test, we're going to test. And you mentioned, you know, the different types of tests. Well, there's a big question mark right there. What kind of tests are you using, and you know, how credible, and what's the track record of those tests? Testing is key. We all understand that. You know, if you listen to the news, you understand how important that is to the overall management of this pandemic. But just saying that you have to test doesn't really answer any questions. I think there's a lot of details that have to be worked out before that testing in the workplace actually happens or takes place.
Wonderful, thank you. Any thoughts on having employees sign waivers or anything, or is that more of an attorney type?
Well, I mean, you know, I was on another one of these presentations. I guess it was just yesterday, and we were talking about that type of concept. And there were some other people on the call that were more attuned to the legal questions. I'm not sure exactly what a waiver would say, and I'm not sure what type of value it would present. I will say that there's value in employers documenting everything that they're doing and making sure the employee acknowledges that they've received the proper training and personal protective equipment and other types of protective measures. So, you know, if you have to put your employees in masks or gloves or whatever, make it clear that that's your policy and that the employee has received your policy and the employee has agreed to you want to create a paper trail. You want to make sure that anybody coming in after this is going to see that you did all the things you're supposed to do. So there's value to that paper trail. A waiver per se, I'm not sure exactly how that would work or what value it would have, but by all means document your actions and make sure that employees acknowledge that they've been given what they need to get.
Gotcha. One of the questions that have popped up is based on around the idea of whenever all this started, there was a lot of the push for sewing of masks and making masks all over the nation. Some gave them freely out, some for sale. What ramifications can come to these groups or small businesses? Isn't some of the liability on the person who bought them or accepted them freely?
Well, that's a good question, but it really goes to the issue of what value do the masks provide. These masks that we're all supposed to be using, and you know, I've got some and I use them when I go out, are not there to protect the wearer. They're there to protect the wearer from transmitting whatever the wearer may have. These are not intended to be protective devices, and nobody should be thinking of them as that, unless you've got a face covering that is specifically rated for protection. And here you're looking for something like the famous N95 respirators. Anything less than that is not intended to protect the wearer, and therefore those who make those masks shouldn't really be exposed to any liability, unless you tried to sell them as saying, if you wear this, you're protected, and then someone gets sick. But you should not be, nobody should be selling those masks or offering those types of face coverings, those cloth face coverings, in the context of saying, if you wear this, you're protected.
Gotcha. You had spoke a little bit about kind of the phase 4, if you will, package that's been put out, and that a lot of this is in that phase 4, and
we hope it's going to be in. That hasn't really. The Republicans in the Senate are making it clear they will have to have this in there if they're going to support some type of package.
Okay, that's what you answered my question. And so you are expecting to see that maybe sometime in June. Between now and June, what is if a business ends up with a lawsuit or some sort of, what needs to happen between now and say whenever that hopefully gets passed. Those protections do get passed.
Well, that's a tough question. I mean, you know, I think our friends in the defense bar, those who work with the employer side, are probably going to be getting a fair amount of business here. And I don't know the answer. I don't think there's a universal answer to what an employer or what a company should be doing. They're going to have to evaluate the specific cases that come to them, and look closely at what they were doing. How much did they cover their tracks with documentation? How much did they truly, how much can they truly say they were doing all the right things? If they really have a strong case, maybe they push it to go to court and see how it goes. As I said, most of these cases are filed with the intent of getting cash settlements and not actually ending up in court. So maybe you can bluff, or maybe you can force the plaintiff's bar into really having to put in more effort than they expect to have. I talked to one business owner a little while ago, happens to be a neighbor of mine, and I was talking about this problem, and he said, not with respect to the COVID situation, but just generally speaking, when they used to get sued for various workplace issues, they would countersue, and they would force the plaintiff's attorney to go into court, and at that point, they usually don't feel like putting in that effort because it takes out their profit margin. So you can fight back in some cases and maybe make some progress that way.
Yeah. Are you hearing of any, what have you, I know most of the cases and the challenges, there's no precedence for a lot of these, right? I mean, so much of your court cases are based off of past precedents, and a lot of the things that have taken place are right now with the companies that have been open through all this. Are y'all seeing, as the U.S. Chamber and looking nationwide, what have you been seeing that businesses and communities are dealing with, if they are quite yet, with the reopening businesses?
Well, let me just sort of comment on the question of precedence. Yeah. These cases have to be filed under some type of law, or alleging a violation of some type of obligation. So in a lot of cases, you're talking about a negligence threshold where you talk about the employer knew or should have known of the hazard and didn't abide by the proper standard of care. In a lot of cases, that standard of care would be something issued by the CDC or some other government authority. The structure under which these cases emerge is well defined, and lots of history on those types of questions. The particulars regarding the COVID situation obviously do not have a long history, but I think the basic legal theories that are being advanced certainly do have a long history, and so the defense bar can look to those for how they respond, and under any given particular law, you've got lots of history. So I mentioned some of the workplace discrimination actions with employees thinking that they've been discriminated because they're too old. Well, we've got lots of case law under that question. We've got case law under basic negligence theory. There's definitely case law to look at here, even if it doesn't already say COVID-19. So I don't think the defense bar is without source material to work from.
Wonderful. So correct me if I'm wrong here. I just want to make sure I'm clear on something as we're talking. A lot of what I've read in U.S. Chamber things is referring to the safe harbor idea on this. That's the whole package y'all put together and taken to Congress, correct?
That's correct. Safe harbor means that if you're conducting yourself in a certain way, you shouldn't be vulnerable to certain outside actions like a lawsuit. You're in a safe harbor. You've done the right thing, and you are protected. You can talk about it as immunity. You can talk about it as safe harbor. They're basically the same concepts here. The important thing, as I stressed earlier, is this isn't for all employers. This is for the employers who have qualified for that level of protection.
Good deal. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on that and everyone is clear on that as we've been taking this information and putting it out there, that everybody's speaking the same language and such. Right. Mark, that's all the questions that we have received and all the questions we have for right now. So I greatly appreciate you taking time and being on our call today. and being with us. And again, greatly appreciate all the work that the U.S. Chamber and your team have done to help our businesses out and continue to do so. This is one of those important topics that sometimes we want to make sure this is an important topic that's going to continue on. It's not a kind of a here and now, but it's as we continue through this process, and wanted to make sure that we had this information for our business community as things might pop up going down the road. And if you look a month out, 2 months out, 4 months out, whatever it might be.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Mike, and it is a partnership. We're happy to work with the local chambers and the state chambers and make sure that we can give you all the information that we've got going on, and that your members are kept as informed as possible. It's been said by many people before me, but we're in uncharted waters here.
We are.
And we're all in it together. We're all trying to figure these things out on the fly.
Yeah.
And so we feel that we've got a role to play here in terms of trying to keep people informed, and also on the advocacy side, as you can see, we're pushing hard to try and get things into place that we know will help businesses and help get people back online. And that's really the goal, right? We're really trying to help people get back into what they were doing before as much as they can be. And that's really ultimately what we're trying to get done. So, we appreciate your support. We appreciate the opportunity to be with you. And you have my contact information if anything comes up afterwards and you're looking for some answers.
Well, thank you. We'll make sure to share your slide deck whenever we put all this up on our COVID-19 resource page. We'll have that on there so people can refer to that as well. And so thank you again for being with us. And we also want to thank everyone that took time to listen today. We understand that these are, as Mark was just saying, these are challenging times and they're uncharted waters, and as we navigate them together. And so we want you to know that the Columbia Chamber, the U.S. Chamber, is all here for all of our other community partners are here to help you and to help your business get back on track and get back in line where it was and be profitable and successful. So as always, please follow the Columbia Chamber of Commerce on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn for continued updates, as well as our COVID-19 resource page. It's located at columbiamochamber.com. And this recording will be available at the conclusion of the webinar. With that, Mark, thank you again so much. We appreciate your time. To everybody else, we appreciate it. And have a wonderful day and stay safe. Thank you.